Hello all. It's actually kind of nice to see so many people here. It really is. Just for a place where we all get together and basically talk, you know, I mean, it's nice to see so many students here too. Today, I want to talk to you about dreams. You know, we all have them, all of us. They all pretty much express what we desire the most. We start dreaming when we're very young, you know, when we're just kids. Princess, knight, you know, doctor, nurse. You even play family when you're young. This evolves later on when we're adolescents into dreams of being a rock star or, you know, a famous singer in a K-pop band, which is the common one today. So many of these kids then spend a lot of time dreaming about this. I know, I was a high school teacher for many, many years. They spend a lot of time dreaming about these things. But even as adults, and for you adults in this room, I know as well as me, as well as you, we all dream of Friday, don't we? We all dream of that time when we can be retired and do nothing but lay on a beach in Thailand, and hopefully things will be perfect, despite the fact we might have saved nothing our entire working career. So how do we actually achieve these dreams, understand what they mean, and get out of our room? Because really the problem is, especially in adolescence, is we have dreams, and so we spend all of our time playing guitar to ourselves in a mirror, but how do we actually take the stage? That really is the problem. How do we take these dreams that we have and make them a part of ourselves? Does that make sense? So, that's the question I wanted to ask myself. How can we actually know what we want and then make that a part of us? Because oftentimes these dreams are beyond us, beyond our reality. We don't understand, number one, how we could possibly make them true, or two, how they can be even within us. So if we look at this idea, the best place to start is with the theory of projection. Psychology, founded psychology, actually is the best place to understand some of these ideas. Well, the theory of projection, if you'll excuse me, by Freud, by the way, is a theory in psychology in which humans defend themselves against their own unpleasant impulses by denying the existence of those impulses in them and placing them on someone else. What's odd about this is this happens every day, and it's proven to us. For example, a person who might be exceptionally rude might see rudeness in another person and then say, oh wow, look how rude she is. It's odd, but we do this. Freud actually brought up this idea for us, and he made us try to understand that those things that we have within us, or those things that we want the most, are often we don't see in ourselves. We see in others. So, we take another idea who was actually founded by his student, Carl Jung. And he suggested a collective unconscious. And some of you may have heard this either from class or from college. If you ever went to college, I'm sure you've even heard of this idea. This collective unconscious is supposed to be a race of human beings acting as one. Kind of like a single mind between all of us. Now, he suggested that as a whole, as an entire race, we project those things that are most desirable within us onto archetypal figures. And for those of you that do not know, archetypes are those symbols, those things that represent the best of us. All right, so Jung says that we actually take the things that we desire the most as a race of people and project them onto figures and symbols that we have in our lives. That's a very interesting idea. The idea was actually first observed in the 6th century BC by a Greek philosopher named Xenophanes. And what he realized was that he studied the cultures of several different cultures in Europe that were all dominated by the Roman Empire, of course. And he noticed that the Nordic people, who were tall, blonde, and bearded, had tall, blonde, and bearded gods. Then he noticed in Ethiopia, where they were tall and black, that their gods also were tall and black. So what's interesting that Xenophanes found was that we tend to project those things that are most desirable within us onto those things that we find most valuable in our life. Okay? Now this relates through a man named Joseph Campbell, who studied this idea extremely deeply during his life. And I believe, I came in at the end, but I believe Joseph Campbell was brought up by yet another speaker, which is funny how the themes of these speeches tend to be around the same basic ideas. So, what are you laughing about? Anyway, so basically Jung says when we project these ideas that we're looking at mythological figures. So it's really the figures in myth which really comprise our best and our worst ideals. I can give you an example. Strength is common want by many people. Young people work out all the time in the gym, try to get bigger and buffer. And what's funny is that as a race of people, as a species, we feel exactly the same way. And this strength is repeated over and over and over in our mythological figures. For example, Gilgamesh, who was one of the first heroes. He was incredibly strong. He was a king who became a commoner. Then we see this again in the Greek, in Hercules. And then we see it again in the Bible, in the character of Samson. Does this make sense? Also, the quality, the trait of cleverness is one of the most valued in the human race. And this again is repeated over and over and over again. For example, the coyote myths, the trickster myths from the Native American Indian tribes. Loki from the Norse mythology. All these guys, and then Theseus again from the Greeks. All these guys represented the highest ideal of what cleverness could be. Okay, well now we transform to the modern age. We have to fast forward a little bit because guess what? I say some of these names. I said 6 mythological names. How many of you did you know? 1? Hercules probably, right? Maybe if you read the Bible, you knew Samson. Our myths are disappearing. At the same time, in the modern age, while the mythology, the mythological figures that we have from the old days are disappearing. Kids don't even know who Nike is anymore, yet they wear her shoes every day. We have been transforming our mythological figures into something else, which is superheroes. And it's very odd to see that these superheroes comprise exactly the same attributes and qualities that we find in mythological figures. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Not really, because men such as Jack Kirby and Stan Lee, to a lesser degree, looked into mythology in order to discover what qualities were there. Now, not all characters were created in this way, and that's one of the ones that I want to talk about. So, if mythological figures are if superheroes are replacing our mythological figures, then they're really doing a direct replacement. They represent exactly the same ideals that we want. They are expressions of us as a whole race, a species of people. And so they represent those things that are deepest within us. Does that make sense? So, the man who actually created the Hulk, excuse me, I actually have my quote, and I need to read it exact word for word. The Hulk I created when I saw a woman lift a car. Her baby was caught under the running board of this car. His mother was horrified, and the woman in desperation lifted the rear end of the car. And it suddenly came to me that in desperation, we can all do that. We can knock down walls, we can go berserk, which we do. You know what happens when we're in a rage. You can tear a house down. I created a character who did all that. So what was interesting about this, and a very telling quote from that one quote from Jack Kirby, is, it suddenly came to me that in desperation, we can all do that. And what was so interesting about this is Kirby realized unconsciously, and it's interesting that Jung said that it was unconscious, he realized unconsciously that he wanted to do those things that seemed impossible, but yet might be within our grasp. So he creates this character of a large green creature who's ultimately strong and can never be stopped because of his rage. The Hulk, right? But the Hulk transforms into a normal man when he is not in a rage. Us, all right? So, how do we connect this to projection? Well, we look at what Kirby did for us, and he creates a character which expresses that feeling that we all have, that I'm angry and I'd really like to rip this place down. It's an expression of a desire that we want, correct? Right, exactly. Well, now that we know where it comes from, how do we do it? I mean, that's really the hard part, isn't it? How do we make this ours? The whole idea of projection is that I take something that's within me, whether it be negative or positive, and I project it onto something else. Jung suggested that we project them onto mythological figures. Well, now in the modern day, we project our wishes onto others, figures, symbols in our society, such as superheroes. So how do we make this ours? How do we bring it back into ourselves? And we look to psychology one more time, because there's a theory of internalization. And what's really interesting about internalization is that the definition of it is, and excuse me again while I actually get it for you, technical definition, is that the integration of attitudes, values, standards, and opinions of others in one's own identity or sense of self. And the whole idea is that we can take things outside of us and we can make them ours. Well, how do we do this? Well, what's interesting is that this is researched. It is proven in this day. For example, in 2010, there was a study that they did on child behavior and moral acquisition. And what they did is they took children from the age of 0 months and they studied them in a longitudinal study until they were 80 months, about 7 years old. And what they did is they realized that children learn rules, right? They learn them mainly from their parents. And when the children learn these rules, at the age of 52 months, if they learn the rules and they obeyed the rules, they perceive themselves as being good or a moral being. What was so interesting, at 52 months, if they realized that they were moral beings, it affected the perception of evaluators at 80 months. You have to actually consider this for a second. If a child learns rules and then obeys those rules and perceives them as good, that causes others to perceive them as good as well. So that their evaluation at 80 months was directly in line with their own thinking. That is internalization. And that idea is exactly what we need to do. We need to realize these qualities within ourselves and then make them ours. All right? So, how do we do this? You know, what does it mean? We take, for a second, we take a view, and I see something that I want. I see that I want success, or that I want to be popular, or that I want to be the owner of 10 million views on YouTube, as he said. And how do we do this? And what's interesting is that many of our speeches are in line with the same thing. but there is a proven process for actually internalizing these things. A lady, Ruth Wilson, who's a psychologist now, a very well-respected psychologist, talks about the theory of internalization by basically starting with recognition. Look at your dreams. What do you want? We've all heard the saying, you know, the first step to overcoming a problem is admitting that you have one, right? Okay, there's a couple of people there that have been to AA before. So if we can admit to ourselves that these are the qualities we want the most within ourselves, then we can recognize them. Now, we need to bring them into us. So how do we do that? But once we recognize them, we study that quality within our projection. For example, the strength, the rage, the ability to do the impossible things in the Hulk's character. So if Kirby had taken more time and studied why he had created that character, he could have realized that those same qualities lie, at least in a smaller percentage, in himself already. And so, by study of that quality within me, I reinforce it, and then others perceive it within me as well. It's fascinating stuff. So basically, my talk is what we need to do is look at our dreams, the things that we want the most, but we don't know how to achieve. And what we need to do is find those qualities that are most appealing to us. We need to recognize them and then study them within our own characters. And when we do that, then we have internalized them. And by internalizing them, then we tend to project them again onto others into a never-ending circle, which only reinforces our personality. It's interesting that nothing I am presenting to you today is new. All these theories have been around since the 1800s. It only takes you realizing that they go together to put them together. So that is what internalization is. We need to look and see what they are, put them together, and then bring them back into ourselves, right? So there are other ways we can accomplish this, because that is hard and introspection is a difficult task, especially for adolescents. There's also something called visualization, and we can often visualize ourselves doing well and achieving those qualities that we most desire in life. For example, to prepare for this speech, I never practiced. And everybody's looking at me like I'm crazy. No, I just imagined myself giving a great speech. And you know what? Look what happened. Now, it's not my experience or the fact that I've done this before, right? So, but what's interesting is that in 1997, they performed this experiment with control groups of 1,000 students, college students. And what they realized is that if they gave 1,000 students a basketball and said, shoot as many free throws as you want, they gave one group of students no basketballs and said, you can't step on a court. Then they gave one group of students no basketballs and said, just imagine yourself making perfect free throws all the time. Now, what's fascinating about it is that who was the best group? Well, now, obviously, the people who actually picked up a basketball, right? But what was more interesting was that less than a statistically significant difference, the group who imagined themselves shooting good baskets shot slightly less good baskets. So the power is within us. The power is inside of us. We can see these things in others, in myths, in superheroes. We can recognize them within ourselves, and then we can visualize ourselves attaining them. So, we can be the Hulk. You just have to picture yourself as green. Thank you.